There was no announcement, no grand rebellion, no manifesto declaring that men were done with dating. It just started happening quietly. Gradually, the texts got shorter, the calls became rarer. The energy that once fueled pursuit dimmed like a fire slowly running out of oxygen. But it wasn't hate that caused it. It was exhaustion. For years, men had played the game exactly as they were told. Be kind. Be patient. Be emotionally available. Show interest. Show effort. Show consistency. They did all that, and somehow it still wasn't enough. Every compliment felt transactional. Every good gesture was seen as an expectation. And every ounce of vulnerability was one more reason to be judged or ignored. So they stopped, not because they stopped caring, but because they got tired of caring alone. See, the modern world doesn't notice quiet suffering. It only reacts to loud complaints, and men rarely complain. They withdraw. It starts with emotional distance, skipping that text, avoiding that argument, choosing silence instead of explaining what's wrong. Then it turns physical. Fewer dates, fewer connections, less interest in proving themselves to anyone, and finally, it becomes philosophical. They start to question why they should keep playing a game where the rules change every week, where effort is mocked and vulnerability is weaponized. Society didn't notice this shift because men didn't announce it. They just faded from the scene, slowly. Like a shadow retreating at dusk, the world kept asking, where did all the good men go? But no one stopped to ask, why did they leave? They didn't leave because they hated love. They left because love started feeling like labor, unpaid, unappreciated, and misunderstood. They got tired of chasing people who treated attention like currency and affection like a performance. They got tired of being told to man up, then criticized for being too strong, too distant, too unemotional. So they did what men throughout history have always done when the system feels rigged. They built their own peace. They replaced dates with gym sessions, arguments with silence, and validation with self-control. And in that quiet withdrawal, something powerful happened. They rediscovered themselves. No drama, no bitterness, just calm, because sometimes walking away isn't about giving up. It's about saving what's left of your soul before the noise consumes it. This silent withdrawal isn't a protest, it's a survival instinct. Men didn't stop loving women. They just stopped loving a system that made love feel like a test. And while the world keeps shouting about toxic masculinity, a quieter truth lingers in the background. Men aren't angry. They're just tired enough to choose peace over pressure. And for the first time in a long time, they're learning that peace can be the most powerful love of all. For generations, men were told that love is earned. Work hard. Be loyal. Provide stability. Do all the right things. And you'll be loved in return. But somewhere along the line, that equation broke. Because what men started to realize, painfully, slowly, is that effort no longer guarantees connection. That love, once built on appreciation, had started to feel more like a scoreboard. They weren't being loved for who they were. They were being loved for what they could offer. Success became the new love language. Affection was conditional. Validation depended on what they could provide: money, attention, status, or emotional labor. And when they stopped performing, the affection stopped too. That's when burnout began. Not the kind that comes from overwork, but from emotional imbalance. The kind of fatigue that comes from giving endlessly while being seen only as a source, not a soul. See, men didn't stop showing love. They just stopped feeling safe to do it. Every time they opened up, it was met with dismissal. Every time they showed emotion, it was labeled weakness. Every time they fell short, it was compared to someone else who did more. And when you live in a constant state of emotional debt, you stop investing altogether. That's what burnout looks like. Not anger, not indifference, just quiet depletion. The truth is, most men don't crave luxury. They crave peace. Not admiration, but understanding. They want to be seen, not sized up. Respected, not tested. But in the modern dating world, relationships have started to feel like job interviews with endless requirements. Be emotionally available, but not too needy. Be confident, but not controlling. Be ambitious, but always have time. Be masculine, but never intimidating. It's a list no one can complete. So slowly, men began to opt out. Not because they hate women, but because they hate who they have to become to be loved by them. They miss the simplicity of connection, when laughter was enough, when silence was comfortable, when loyalty wasn't treated like a rare miracle. But in today's culture, love feels transactional, a constant negotiation between expectations and exhaustion. And the men who once tried to keep up have started to sit down. They've realized that peace of mind is more valuable than approval, that solitude can feel lighter than performance, and that the only validation worth having is the kind that comes from within. This isn't withdrawal out of bitterness. It's recovery from burnout, because when love feels like labor, the heart eventually clocks out. And maybe, just maybe, the modern man's greatest rebellion is learning that he doesn't have to prove his worth just to be worthy of love. For generations, men were told a simple truth: work hard, be loyal, be strong, and you'll earn love. It was the unwritten rule of manhood, a quiet promise passed from fathers to sons, that effort leads to affection, that sacrifice guarantees stability, and that being a good man means being a loved man. But modern reality didn't keep that promise. The harder many men worked, the more invisible they felt, the more loyal they were, the more taken for granted they became. It wasn't hatred that broke them, it was disappointment. Because deep down, every man who gives his all hopes that someone will see it, feel it, value it. But when that recognition never comes, something inside quietly shuts down. The reward they were told to expect, love, peace, partnership, was replaced by confusion and fatigue. The formula stopped working. Loyalty wasn't rewarded anymore. It was assumed. Effort wasn't appreciated. It was expected. And emotional consistency, once seen as strength, started to feel like background noise in a world addicted to novelty. Modern love, for many men, began to feel like a moving target. They kept showing up, giving, fixing, proving, but the finish line always shifted. It wasn't that they stopped caring. They just stopped believing that effort alone could sustain connection. Because somewhere between traditional values and modern expectations, the reward system flipped. The same loyalty that once built families now gets labeled as boring. The same patience that once meant maturity now gets mistaken for lack of ambition. And the same man who once would have been seen as dependable now gets scrolled past in favor of someone more exciting. And so, they learn to withdraw, not out of ego, but out of exhaustion. They realize that giving endlessly in an environment that doesn't reciprocate isn't love. It's self-erasure, the dream of partnership, of two against the world, lost its shine, replaced by quiet doubt, because what's the point of loyalty in a world that celebrates convenience? What's the point of being strong when strength is only noticed when it's gone? And what's the point of love if it feels more like performance than peace? So men began to rewrite the lesson. They stopped chasing validation through effort and started finding value in stillness. They stopped trying to earn love and started protecting energy. Because when the reward disappears, the wise don't keep running the same race. They change direction. And maybe that's what's really happening now, a quiet revolution. Not against women, but against a broken promise. The promise that effort guarantees love. It doesn't. Love is no longer the reward for endurance. It's the reflection of balance. And until that balance returns, men will keep choosing peace over performance. Now, dating feels like walking on eggshells. Every word is analyzed. Every pause is questioned. Every boundary, no matter how respectful, is seen as selfish. What was once meant to bring connection now feels like constant negotiation. Men who once spoke freely now measure every sentence. Because in today's dating culture, one wrong tone can turn affection into accusation. It's not about fear, it's about fatigue. The modern relationship space, once meant for love and safety, has slowly turned into a battlefield of expectations, opinions, and hidden resentment. A simple disagreement can spiral into days of tension. A missed call becomes proof of disinterest, and expressing emotional needs, often labeled as weakness, manipulation, or even control, so men stopped talking. Not because they stopped feeling, but because they got tired of defending feelings that were never meant to be arguments in the first place. They realized that silence, though lonely, was still more peaceful than walking through another emotional minefield. Peace became the new luxury. Because what's the point of companionship if it constantly feels like conflict management? What's the point of communication if every attempt to explain yourself becomes ammunition? Men learn to choose quiet, not out of indifference, but out of self-preservation. They saw how easily small misunderstandings turned into full-blown fights, how emotional honesty was often punished instead of appreciated, and how vulnerability, the very thing relationships are supposed to protect, started feeling unsafe. In a world where everyone's healing and setting boundaries, empathy got lost somewhere along the way. And what's left is a strange tension, where both sides crave love, but neither feels safe enough to give it. Modern dating, to many men, feels less like romance and more like risk assessment. One wrong move and you're judged, blocked, or labeled. So they began pulling away, not from love itself, but from the chaos attached to it, because peace is addictive. Once a man tastes what it's like to live without constant conflict, without emotional guessing games, without the fear of saying the wrong thing, it's hard to go back. Silence starts to feel safer than conversation. Solitude starts to feel lighter than compromise, and emotional distance begins to feel like freedom. This isn't bitterness, it's adaptation. Men are learning that not every connection brings calm. And when calm is gone, love loses its meaning. They're realizing that companionship without peace is just another form of loneliness, only louder. And so, more and more men are choosing the quiet, not because they've stopped believing in love, but because they've finally understood something profound. Peace isn't the absence of people, it's the absence of conflict. And in a culture that turns every emotion into a battle, walking alone starts to feel like victory. Solitude stopped being loneliness. It became clarity, a quiet room, a simple meal, a peaceful night with no tension, no guessing games, no emotional chaos. These became signs of control, not emptiness. What used to feel like isolation now feels like independence, because peace, once rare and fragile, has turned into the ultimate luxury. For years, men were told that being alone meant failure, that solitude was something to escape, not embrace. But somewhere along the way, that narrative broke. Now, the modern man looks at solitude differently. He doesn't see it as a punishment. He sees it as a reset, a space where he doesn't have to perform, doesn't have to prove his worth, doesn't have to fight for the bare minimum of respect. When he's alone, he's finally free, free from walking on eggshells, free from unspoken expectations, free from the invisible scoreboard of modern dating. Freedom, he realized, isn't loud, it's quiet. It's the calm that comes when you're no longer trying to fix what doesn't want to heal. It's waking up with your mind clear, your energy your own, your time completely yours. In that silence, something beautiful happens. men start hearing themselves again, their real thoughts, their forgotten dreams, the goals that once got buried under emotional noise. He remembers what it's like to create without distraction, to work not for approval but for passion, to rest, not because he's exhausted from conflict, but because he's at peace with himself. This is the redefinition of freedom. It's not rebellion, it's recovery. Men aren't walking away from relationships because they hate love. They're walking toward a life that finally feels honest. A life where peace isn't negotiated, where silence isn't suspicious, and where happiness doesn't depend on constant validation. He's learned that solitude doesn't mean no one cares. It means I care enough to protect my energy. And that shift from chasing love to choosing peace is the quiet revolution of this generation. Because real freedom isn't found in escape, it's found in ownership. Owning your time, owning your emotions, owning your space. No longer needing someone else to complete you, because you've realized you are never incomplete. In a world that celebrates noise, he's learning to love silence. And in that silence, he's not lonely, he's free, because for the first time, his peace doesn't depend on anyone else. And that's a kind of happiness no relationship has ever been able to give him. There comes a point when a man stops looking outward and starts looking inward, when he stops asking, what do they want from me? And starts asking, what do I want for myself? That's where the quiet transformation begins. That's where men are returning not to relationships, not to romance, but to themselves. For too long, men were told their value depended on how useful they were to others, how much they could give, protect, fix, or provide. But after years of giving everything and receiving confusion in return, something inside them snapped, softly but permanently. Now, they're chasing something different. Not validation, not attention, not acceptance. They're chasing peace. Because peace doesn't demand performance, it doesn't keep score. It doesn't make them feel like they're never enough. Men are rediscovering the beauty of their own company. They're learning that solitude isn't silence, it's self-connection. The conversations they used to have with people who never listened, they now have with themselves, and for once, the answers make sense. He wakes up early not to impress anyone, but because he finally has energy again. He goes to the gym not to look better for someone else, but to feel stronger in his own skin. He takes long drives, cooks his own meals, spends nights building, writing, thinking, and for the first time, it doesn't feel like waiting. It feels like living. You see, when a man stops chasing validation, he begins to rebuild identity. Not the version the world told him to be, but the version that was always there, buried under pressure, expectations, and noise. He realizes peace isn't passive, it's powerful. It's saying no without guilt. It's walking away without bitterness. It's smiling alone without needing applause. Men are rediscovering rhythm, their own rhythm, the pace of purpose, the flow of calmness, the strength that comes not from dominance, but from discipline. And something incredible happens when a man returns to himself. He stops needing to prove and starts to be. He becomes grounded, unshakable, centered. He's no longer chasing love. He's embodying it. Because love, at its core, begins here within. And a man who loves himself doesn't fear solitude. He honors it. This is the quiet renaissance of modern men. They're not lost. They're rediscovering. They're not broken. They're rebuilding. They're not cold. They're calm. And maybe, for the first time in decades, they're starting to feel whole again. Because when a man finds peace within himself, he stops needing the world to give it to him. He becomes his own home, his own validation, his own freedom dot. And that is the true return to self. This isn't the end of love. It's the evolution of it for generations. Men were told what it means to be strong, to chase, to conquer, to provide. But somewhere between the noise and the expectations, they forgot what it meant to simply be at peace. Now, that's changing, quietly, powerfully, irreversibly, because this isn't about men giving up on love. It's about men redefining it. They're no longer looking for chaos disguised as passion or attention disguised as affection. They're looking for alignment, for ease, for peace. They're not anti-relationship. They're pro-sanity, pro-freedom, pro-self-respect. This is the new masculine era, not built on dominance, but on discipline, not fueled by control, but by calm. Not about proving worth, but protecting peace, you see. Modern men aren't walking away from women. They're walking away from the versions of themselves that kept trying to earn love through exhaustion. They've realized that peace is the new power, that silence is the new status, that solitude is not a punishment, it's preparation. He no longer needs validation to feel valued. He doesn't need attention to feel alive. He doesn't need to chase to feel wanted. He just is. And that quiet confidence, that self-contained strength, it's changing everything. Because when a man stops begging to be seen, he starts becoming visible in ways he never was before. When he stops proving his worth becomes obvious. When he stops chasing love, love finally has space to meet him halfway. That's the paradox of this new masculine era. Men aren't rejecting love. They're refining the terms of it. They're saying, if it costs my peace, it's too expensive. They're saying, if it drains me, it doesn't deserve me. They're saying, if it makes me lose myself, it's not love, it's control. This shift isn't loud. It's not angry. It's not a rebellion of hate. It's a revolution of healing. You can see it in small ways. In the man who takes a walk instead of arguing, who chooses silence over shouting, who spends his nights building, learning, growing, instead of trying to fix what doesn't want to be fixed. He's not bitter. He's balanced, not withdrawn, just wise. He's learned that real love doesn't demand chaos to prove it's real. It flows, it supports, it calms, and maybe, just maybe, this is the healthiest love story yet. Because it's not about finding someone to complete him. It's about being complete enough to choose someone freely. The new masculine era isn't about walking away. It's about walking home, to peace, to purpose, to himself.